Is John G in the house? There he is. Come on up, friend. So this afternoon is largely begun. Why don't you? You're gonna. Okay, cool. You're gonna do that. That's awesome. We like to reframe the conversation in the afternoon after lunch. We've done this for a couple of years, and it's been very successful. And we've been nibbling around this issue for some time, but streaming, right, is a thing. It's a reality. And in the realm of local television, quote unquote, it either is or isn't or maybe is a thing, right? There are a lot of uncertainties about it. It's clearly a challenge to traditional conventions, but it's also sort of the latest evolution, if you will, of viewing behavior, how consumers or people get content. It can be age-based. There's so many different sort of flavors and stuff, but streaming is going to be part of the conversation, not only in this presentation that you can hear from John in a second, but also in the subsequent two panels where we get into ad-supported streaming generally, and then afterwards, a conversation more pointedly around streaming and local and what that means and what that mashup is or could be over time. So that's kind of some framing, and we've got some other fun conversations near the end, and then there will be cocktails, as we had last night, probably different brands of cocktails and stuff. So that's all to come. So power up. There's still coffee back there if you can't handle it all. John, I'm going to let you introduce yourself, where you're, the organization, how you set up and stuff. And thank you for being here, because this is helpful information, and I'm assuming you don't mind people taking pictures of your slides.
No, you can take pictures, and I sent you guys the deck. You can share out the deck.
We can forward it too. Yep. So if you miss it here, we'll get them there. And John, why don't you introduce yourself, and thank you very much.
Cool. Thanks, Tim. Thanks, everybody, for coming today. My name's Jon Giegengack. I am the founder of a company called Hub Entertainment Research. It's 10 years old this year, and we have been, thank you for that. I feel like it was a Jeb Bush. Please clap. We specialize in consumer research on how people find and choose and consume and pay for or don't pay for TV content. So we've been doing that for 10 years. We do about 50,000 consumer interviews each year. And what I'm going to show you today are findings from across all those different studies that we've done roughly over the last 12 months. And this is something that we do for our clients, our subscribers each year, is we try to come up with sort of what are the 4 or 5 biggest trends. And it's a very subjective process, but basically what we try to do is figure out what are some trends that are happening, changes that are happening in the marketplace that are really important because they affect large numbers of people, or because they have a really big impact on behavior, or because they're changes that are going to stick around for a long time, or, as is the case this year, they're all 3 of those things at once. And so what I'm going to talk about today are these kind of 4 main themes. So this kind of growing need for simplicity that TV consumers have today that's bigger than it's ever been before. We're going to talk about the role of content, not just in which shows people choose, but which platforms they choose, or which platforms they don't choose. We're going to talk about connected TVs and kind of this compound interest, this growing level of influence that smart TVs, connected TVs, and their operating systems have on which shows and which platforms get found and which ads get seen. And then finally, we're going to talk about this renaissance in ad-supported TV. It's been about 15 years now since Netflix convinced a lot of people that consumers would never watch ads again unless you held them by the hair and forced them to. And there's lots and lots of evidence today that that is just not the case. And in fact, there's lots of consumers who will choose ad-supported TV over ad-free ones if the situation is right. So we're going to talk about that. So starting with this need for simplicity, if you had to put your finger on one thing that sort of dictates what the TV ecosystem looks like today, it's this diffusion of content, this proliferation of sources. So in every survey we do, we capture all the different sources that people use, from ad-free streaming, ad-supported streaming, fasts, cable, virtual MVPDs, over-the-air, pretty much everything you can think of. And on the back end, we just do a simple calculation to figure out what's the average number of platforms that each respondent is using. And this has been climbing every year since we've done this in 2013. It peaked in 2022. It fell down to 6.4 in 2023. When we put this number out, there was a lot of articles about how streaming is cratering, consumers are rejecting it. Really all that happened is it fell to still the second highest number that we've ever seen. So by any standard, people are using a lot of different sources all at once to get their content from. And one of the big things that's contributing to this complexity is that people are using a lot of these big streaming platforms. So what we're looking at here is the whole sample each year distributed by how many of the 5 biggest streaming platforms they're using. The 5 biggest being Netflix, Hulu, Amazon, Max, and Disney+. The green bars are the percent of people who are using 2 or more of those platforms. So you can see that in 2023, 61% of everybody is using at least 2 of those big 5 streaming platforms. 28% of people, more than a quarter of them, are using 4 or all 5. So the number that are stacking more and more of those platforms is very significant. The average person is using more than one of them. When you stop and think about the fact that every one of those platforms contains thousands of titles, more TV than any one person can watch, but they're all trying to be crammed into the same 24-hour day, you get an idea of how much competition there is for each viewing session, but you also get a sense of how unwieldy it is for consumers to decide what they're going to watch next. Now, one of the things that this creates is this growing need for simplicity. Simplicity has become something that is valuable enough that people will be willing to pay for it. So here we asked, would you pay, how many people agree or disagree with the following statements? I'd pay for an app or service that lets me manage, use, and pay for all of my subscriptions in one place. 59% of people said they agreed with that, only 41% disagreed. This statement says, I'd subscribe to a bundle that includes subscriptions I don't use if it saves me money on the ones that I do. 75% of people agreed with that. So 75% of people said, I would buy a bundle that includes some services that I don't really use that much if it simplifies everything and lets me get a better deal, if it saves me money. So into this really complex ecosystem comes the role of content. So we find that there are people that have the awareness of all the individual streaming platforms is really, really high. But when you ask people, how confident are you that you could explain to somebody else what this platform does and how it's different from the others, the results you get are about half of the awareness. So there's 96% of people know what Apple TV Plus is. There's about 42% of people that think they know why Apple TV Plus is. Why would you need that? How is it different from all the others? And that's from a company that we think of really as a master of branding. So into this confusion about the platforms themselves, what people are familiar with is the content. And so the content has taken a really big role, not just in which shows people watch, but which platforms they choose in the first place. So in one of our surveys, we asked, have you signed up for a service just to watch one specific show? I think this was in the past year. 41% of people said they'd done that in 2023. That's up for 35% in 2021. When we look at Gen Z, people under 25, it's 57%. So that's really kind of the norm for them. A particular title is enough to make them sign up for, but also drop. So we asked people, have you ever canceled a new subscription within 6 months of signing up? Among everybody, 42% said yes. Among people under age 25, 58% said yes. So this idea, this revolving door churn, is really becoming kind of standard operating procedure when people jump in and jump out of platforms just based on the content that's available. So again, one of the statements we asked about, and this is just from last month, I often subscribe, cancel, and then resubscribe to services so that I'm only paying when there are shows on that I want to watch. 43% of everybody said they agreed with that that's something that they do on a regular basis. Among people 18 to 24, it's 62%. Among people 25 to 34, it's 59%. So increasingly, this jumping in and out, this revolving door churn, is becoming something that's an everyday part of how people watch. Now, when we ask people, why did you cancel that service? And this was among any service that they had canceled, the biggest reason was that there's no more shows of interest. I ran out of stuff to watch. Like, how could that possibly be true with all the shows that are being made? And we just showed you that they're all using 3 of those big 5 streaming platforms. Like, you would think the last thing they would run out of is stuff to watch. But what it really means is that they ran out of stuff that they recognize. And so what's really becoming a big factor is using content or IP or stories that are familiar that will make one piece of content stand out amongst this whole ocean of things that sometimes they feel like it's so big and there are so few guideposts that it feels like they've run out of stuff to watch. So I'm going to show a couple of examples of this kind of content discovery chain where companies have used, on purpose or not, familiar content or franchises to get people to start watching and then get them to keep watching, making sure that they're not one of the people that checks that box and says, I ran out of something to watch when this initial show is over. So Yellowstone, fantastic TV show, biggest show on cable. And we asked everybody in our sample, we said, have you watched Yellowstone? 29% of everybody in the sample said that yes, they had. And then we asked them, have you watched any of these other shows that are part of the Yellowstone universe? So 1883, 1923 are directly part of Yellowstone. Tulsa King and Mayor of Kingstown are advertised as brought to you by Taylor Sheridan, by the people that created Yellowstone. 70% of the people that watched Yellowstone said they had watched at least one of those other shows. And that's a pretty good performance no matter what. But when you consider that all of the Yellowstone episodes are either on Paramount Network or they're on Peacock, all these other shows, you have to sign up for Paramount Plus to watch them. So we don't know how many of those people would have had Paramount Plus subscriptions anyway, but I would suspect that a whole lot of them signed up specifically to watch these other shows. And I mean, imagine if they were all on the same platform, which is how you would have done it if you kind of designed this from scratch. But even so, just that one familiar piece of content was enough to get people to sign up for Paramount Plus just to watch one of these other shows that they were familiar with. Once they're on there, those other shows are only released one episode a week. So they're taking that same investment in new content and they're really extending the amount of time that they hold people's attention. Another one that we looked at was The Last of Us. So if you're familiar with this is a TV show based on a video game from 2013, so not even a new video game. And a lot of people weren't sure what to make of this. However, when the show came out, the viewership of season 1, episode 1 was the second biggest launch on HBO Max after House of the Dragon. And then the growth from episode 1 to episode 2, I think that's like 22%. That was the biggest jump in the history of HBO, not just on streaming, but the whole history of the channel. And a lot of people were surprised, where did all these people come from? And I make the case that no one should have been surprised by this. So that game came out in 2013. 37 million people played that game. I think a little bit less than that played The Last of Us 2. They all spent $60 on it. They spent 18 hours going through the campaign. And the first episode of the show basically follows the first hour of the game, like minute for minute. So there was this big latent group of Last of Us fans that were just out there in the marketplace waiting for someone else to capitalize on this content. So we actually went out and we surveyed some of those people. When we looked, this is just among gamers, but among everybody in our sample, 38% said they had watched the show, 43% had played The Last of Us, either part 1 or part 2. But the really interesting thing is that if you did one, chances are that you did both. There were fewer people that only did one or the other. Most people who had either watched or played did both together. Now, mostly people had played the game first. That's partly because we were talking to gamers specifically in the sample. But when we asked people who had played the game first, we said, did that game have an influence on whether or not you decided to watch the show? 62% of all of those people said that the game was the main reason that they watched the show. They wouldn't have watched it otherwise. A lot of those people did not have a Max subscription already, so there's a lot of people who went and subscribed for Max just because they wanted to see this show. They wanted to see this show just because it was leveraging a story that they were already familiar with from the game. And when we looked at people who, we wanted to look at engagement with the show, among people who played the game first and then did both, 62% of them said that they watched every single episode. If you didn't play the game and you only watched the show, only about half of those people watched all the episodes. So kind of, you've probably heard about Netflix talking about how their goal is to have all those red bars for a season of a show all filled out all the way through. Somebody watched 100% of every episode. By leveraging that story that these gamers were familiar with, they created that kind of level of engagement. Those people were highly likely to watch every single episode. Those episodes came out once a week. So they were holding those people's attention for 9 or 10 weeks and giving them lots of more chances to expose them to other shows they'd be interested in. And again, minimizing that chance that they'd be one of those people that says, I just ran out of stuff to watch, so I quit. So that's kind of looking at content, sort of this complexity of the system in general, the importance of content and where people choose to watch or not. But another big factor here is this sort of compound interest of CTV. So the number of people that have a connected TV, the number of people that are using them to watch, and the fact that people are actually now going out to shop for a TV with an intention of using the connected capabilities. So we have one study that just looks at the usage of smart TVs every quarter. The ownership of smart TVs rose in quarter 3 from 2020 from 65% up to 77% in quarter 3 of 2023. And that's not surprising. It's pretty hard to go out and buy a TV set now that isn't a smart TV, even if you wanted to for some reason. But where we see an even bigger increase is the number of people who are using the apps inside their smart TV to stream. So they're not taking them home and plugging them into a cable box. They're not plugging in some external media player and using the apps from that. They're using the native apps inside of the TV set. That has grown 38% from 2020 to 2023. There's now 2/3 of households have a smart TV and they use those apps inside of them to stream. And maybe even a bigger indication of how important this is we ask people, what's the first thing you turn on when you want to watch? We show them a list of all the different devices they use, and we ask them, what's your home base? What do you look at first? And these are the 3 top answers for 2021 through 2023. The 3 top answers are all watching on a TV set. But you can see that, I'm going to step down here so I can see what I'm talking about. If we look at 2021 first, you can see the number 1 answer then was TV set plugged into a set-top box. 41% of people said that was their top choice or their first stop. Number 2 was TV set with built-in smart TV apps. That was 22%. And then number 3 was a TV set via some external device like a Roku box or an Apple TV Plus box. 17% of people said that. Now, if you fast forward to 2023, the number of people who say my default source, my starting point is a set-top box from a pay TV provider, that's dropped all the way down to 30. The number of people who said my default device is a connected TV box externally plugged into my TV set, that's about the same at 19%. The number of people who say that the first thing I look at is a TV set, one of the apps inside of my smart TV, that's risen all the way to 32% in 2 years. It's now the most popular answer. And so we see one thing that's true about human nature is it's really hard to get people to change their habits. And that's true of television. It's one reason why cord cutting isn't more accelerated than it is because people are used to watching this way. But in all the studies we've done, I've never seen a difference, a change in behavior that big in that short of a time for something that usually is pretty stable, like which device people use to watch with. And there's no reason to think that this trend is going to reverse. Probably no reason to think it's even going to slow down. MPD, a lot of the retail tracking research companies say that we're at the end of a life cycle for a lot of the TV sets that are out there right now. There's going to be a whole lot more people that are out shopping for TV sets. Now, when people go out to shop for a TV set, they actually are seeking out a smart TV. Again, you would have trouble not buying a smart TV if you wanted to, but people are actually looking at the smart capabilities because they want to use those when they get home. So all of this means that these smart TV operating systems have tremendous influence, not only over what shows people watch, but also what platforms they use. We found in one of our surveys that 50% of people who have a smart TV say they install apps during the setup process, then they never install any again after that. So there's this kind of limited window for platforms to get exposure, and the smart TV operating systems have tremendous influence over which ones people discover, and they a lot of ability to show their own fast networks because they can show that in the interface anytime that they want to. So the last thing I think which is appropriate for this event, obviously, but this is one of the things we've been telling our clients in general, is that TV with ads is having a renaissance. So, not too long ago, Netflix dropping all of its episodes at once, having all the shows ad-free, the conventional wisdom was that, ad-supported TV is over. No one is going to watch ads anymore unless we force them to do it. And in reality, the answer is a lot more complicated than that. But in general, one of the things that's, I think, influencing this uptake of platforms that have advertising is that people are just feeling the pinch of how many different platforms they have, and the fact that expense of kind of piling those up on your own is sort of giving lie to the idea that cord cutting is always going to save you money. And especially as those streaming platforms keep raising their rates. So 88% of people agree that streaming video subscriptions are raising their prices more often than they have in the past few years. And this also leads to a greater tolerance for ad-supported platforms if it's going to save them money. So 58% of people said the more subscriptions I pay for, the more I'm open to subscriptions that cost less or are free but have ads in them. And I think this is a really interesting study. So we asked people, we showed them these 3 statements, and we said, which one of these describes you the best? Content matters the most. If I'm really interested in a show, it doesn't matter to me if there are ads, I'll watch it anyway. The gray bar is I can tolerate a certain number of ads, but if there's too many, I'm going to go watch somewhere else. And then the red bar are the people who say, no, I can't stand ads, and I'm not going to watch them no matter what. So you can see that the red bar between June of 21 and December of 22 has stayed the same and not very large, about 16% of people. The percent of people who say that content matters the most, if there's a show I really want to see and I have to watch ads to see it, I'm going to do that, rose from 26% up to 35%. One really interesting thing, even among the people in that red bar who say, I just can't tolerate ads, among those people, there's another question where we asked them, would you watch on an ad-supported platform if it saved you $5 a month? 30% of the people in that red bar said that they would do that. So even the people who say, I just can't stand ads, if the equation is right, if the content is right, if it saves them money, or if the ad experience is good enough, if they're not being inundated with ads, but the ad load is reasonable, even the people that are ad intolerant will tolerate ads in practice when you put the choice to them. So really the intolerance of ads among some people in the industry who think there isn't tolerance for ads seems to be pretty overstated. Now, one of the interesting things, too, is the rise of FAST platforms, and we have one study that just looks at ad-supported TV with a whole section on FASTs. And I think one of the ideas about maybe ad-supported TV in general, but especially FAST, is that you're only going to be reaching the people that don't care that much about TV. They're stingy, they don't want to spend on content, and they're maybe not the most valuable audience to have anyway. But what we did in our study is we compared people that use at least one FAST, and then we compared them to people that don't use FAST at all. And there are some interesting attributes that we found. One is that they are more likely, FAST users are more likely to be under age 35. They're more likely to have kids in households, so both of those are pretty important audiences to be able to reach. They're more likely to be early adopters of technology. They're more likely to have 3 or more other streaming subscriptions. So they're not sort of TV aesthetics where they're just want to see the bare basics. They're actually more likely to be sort of TV omnivores that are consuming from lots and lots of different platforms. And then the last thing is that they're not stingy. They are just as likely as the people who don't use FAST to say that they spend at least $100 a month on TV in some way or another. So these are people being reached through free platforms that are actually really invested in watching TV, and they're really willing to pay for content. It looks to us like really the FAST users are folks maybe that like to watch a lot of TV and have hit the platform or the limit of how many platforms they want to pay for or how many they can use, but they still want to try out that curiosity, see what else is out there, and FAST platforms are a perfect vehicle for doing that. Now, one of the other things that we found out about ads is that it's not really that big of a difference when it comes to platform selection. So people who signed up for an ad-free platform, we said, what are the reasons you signed up for this? They could pick as many of these as they wanted to. You can see that the fact that it was ad-free is only the 4th most popular reason. The most popular reason, as is always the case, as we talked about earlier, is that they want to get access to some shows that weren't on some other platform. So that matters more than whether or not there's ads. And when we asked people who canceled an ad-supported platform, why did you cancel it? The fact that they didn't want to see the ads anymore is the next to last reason. So people that are using ad-free platforms, they cancel them, but it's rare that they cancel them because of the ads. And I think one reason for that is that now people can choose between ad-free and ad-supported versions of the same platform. So here we're looking at the percentage of people who say they're very satisfied. The dark blue bar are people that are using the ad-free version of that platform. The light blue is people that are using the ad-supported one. And the main, we don't have to go through these all in detail because the main finding is that there's really almost no difference at all. And that shows you that if you give people the choice of ad-free or ad-supported, everybody is getting the experience that they opted in for. No one's being forced to compromise for some experience that isn't exactly what they wanted. And that's really important because if consumers have learned nothing else from streaming TV, it's that they never have to compromise again. There's countless platforms, more content than anybody could watch. So just giving them the flexibility to choose how they want to watch has a massive, massive impact on how satisfied they are and how likely they are to keep their subscription. So just a few conclusions here. Viewers are watching from a tremendous number of sources, the second highest number that we've ever seen. And that means that for many, simplicity matters as much as cost. There are just as many people who say that they don't add more platforms because they're at their maximum budget as there are people who say, I'm not adding many more platforms because I just literally can't use anymore. So that bandwidth is something that's as big of a barrier as cost. It's very rare that anything is as big of a barrier as cost is. When it comes to using content, it's really important not to let viewers get to that point where they feel like they ran out of things to watch, even though we know it's nonsense, they didn't really. But making sure there's something always queued up that'll be the next thing that they're interested in to keep them engaged. Smart TVs have this huge and growing influence, not over just what people watch, but what shows they discover and even what platforms they discover in the first place and what ads they see. And then finally, tolerance for ads is higher than many people suspect. A majority of people are willing to watch ads in order to, for any of these reasons or all of these reasons, to get access to a show they want, to save some money, and especially if the ad experience is not too onerous. If it doesn't interrupt what they're watching, or better yet, if the ads are relevant to what they're watching, they can actually be kind of additive to the experience. So we're really bullish on the future of ads in TV, especially as the market grows more crowded and people are spending more and more money. If you guys have any questions, I'd be happy to answer any of them now. You can email them to me, and then we'll make this deck available to the conference folks too, if you want to get it that way.
Thank you, John.
Yep.
Oh, go ahead. But let's applause, please, first. Then. Yeah. All right. Before we get to the question, I'll have the ad-supported folks come up onto the stage now to get set up, and we'll entertain a question. Go ahead. Go right ahead.
Just real quick.
Real loud. Stand up. Thanks.
When you did your surveys, if you look at apps and what apps people like better, maybe they like Peacock or
Yep.
what was their preference for those?
There was, we did find some, we have a whole study that kind of goes into super granular detail on that, but we did find some really interesting things. Maybe the most interesting thing was, so we asked people, was the ad load on this platform reasonable or unreasonable? And then, did you see more ads on this platform or fewer than on other platforms? Discovery Plus had the highest number of people who said that platform has more ads than the others. And it also had the highest results for people who said the ad load was reasonable. So there were more ads, but they felt like the ad load was reasonable, and it's because the ads really fit well with like the Travel Channel or Food Network. The ads are sort of additive. They're relevant to what the people are watching, and that makes all the difference right there. Yep.
Else? Question?
Actually, I don't know, I just got a bit curious about it, John. If somebody had asked me this the other day, and I didn't know if you had pressed this. Do people see a difference between the fast services that sort of show up on their TV automatically, like a Samsung TV Plus, and a Pluto, which has to, they have to sort of find an app, find the app, and do they sort of see it as the same thing, or some of them do, some of them don't? Did you not get that?
People have they have trouble telling the difference, and even when they're watching on their own TV, sometimes they think they're watching one app and they're actually watching a different one. And I think the OEM fasts are even a little bit more susceptible to that. But viewership of the number of people who discover one of those after they get the TV, obviously it would be higher because you have to have the TV, but the difference is really, really stark, and you can tell they're using that interface to surface it to them more often, and it's really effective at getting more viewers.
Actually, I have one quick question for you
Yeah.
before you run, because I get it off easy. What do you think is going to happen given that Netflix now has so decreased the cost of their now ad-supported platform, almost to it just seems really obvious to the outside observer that they just want to push more people to ad-supported versus the ad avoidance?
Well, in our research, there isn't all of the ad-supported platforms for all those companies are good at extending their addressable reach. So for the most part, they're getting new people who wouldn't have signed up otherwise, and there's relatively little cannibalization where they're pushing people into the from the ad-free into the ad-supported. If they sign up for ad-free already, mostly that's what they wanted to have, but it does make them a viable option for more people that might not have used them at all if the price wasn't lower.
Very interesting. Thank you, John,
Yep.
very much.
Thank you
Awesome.
very much.